Greetings, Americans, Indians, Asian, African, Afri- African, African American, Asian, Arabic Americans as well. For a couple of weeks now, when there was a report that uh, there was a peace treaty signed between South Korea and Australia, which is a legitimate reality. That is a real peace treaty. However, Americans such as myself, I consider myself an American. I was educated in the United States, reportedly like Barack Obama, born also in the United States, but it was wartime. I was born in 1967, November 11th, during the Vietnam War. Many people, such as myself and my predecessor, Mr. President Obama, had uncertainties about the realities of birth certificates. However, I definitely was educated and raised in the United States. Certainly at the latest since 1971. Now, this is why I want to tell you the question is, how we understand the competition to put it mildly, with China, between China and the United States and my native country, India, and associated problems for Asian countries, including uh, up to perhaps Philippines and then African countries as well. Uh, Number one, the United States had two sets of stories that they were putting out when I was educated in the United States. One was that there's a difference between China and Taiwan, North Korea and South Korea, Singapore, Japan, even Philippines, emphasizing in my education the individual differences of all these pieces of the Orient, which is, without any negative connotation, a legitimate word that was, taken out of the vocabulary during my upbringing at some point. Now, at the same time of that kind of story, there was also the ongoing American diplomatic one China policy. That means China and Taiwan are one. North Korea and South Korea are one, even perhaps up to Japan and Singapore, that these are all part of China. What we're seeing in the news today, now that the daylight of Christmas is over, we have a few days before our New Year's festivities. What we're seeing in the news and the reporting, etc., and is really the focus on the reality of this one China or one Orient. Now, excuse me, the United States relationship, as we send our athletes to China for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics, is described as a competition, in economic competition. It's also described as a retrenching of the Chinese boundaries, pulling back on some of these outerlying areas, including Africa, including parts of Asia, perhaps, settling the score with India. But India is, unfortunately, entwined with the American involvement in Australia. China still, has not completed the peace treaty with Australia, and India is still, facing involvement in the American and British war. Regarding Australia, where there would be minimal Indians residents, even as far as I know, there are very few Indians who live even in Australia. But because India, and as I said, I was raised and reportedly born in the United States. India has a boundary with China and is being asked to kind of cover that flank. Yet what we see is not Chinese expansionism right now, but pulling back a bit. So that's phase one of this report, and I will continue with phase two. The next thing I want to talk about is the re-describing of uh, U.S. Interest of China as one China, which China always insisted on that the United States adhere to a one China policy. That Taiwan, China, even as I mentioned, up to Japan and possibly Singapore, all be considered one China. Countries that are up for grabs are places like Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., which are not naturally fitting into the Chinese population uh, scheme, which I will, without prejudice, call Orient, parts of the Orient. Malaysia, Indonesia, Laos, Cambodia, parts of Indochina, these are not naturally, and these are not in the Indian sphere of influence as either. These are, for example, Muslim countries, more into Arabia than India. So now this is why I mention it. You see, China reorganizing, its boundaries. It's like a business reorganization. The reporting that China is getting weaker is not necessarily correct. They say Amazon.com is facing bankruptcy. Donald Trump had 10 bankruptcies before he became president. And, he hasn't given up on that either. So I would not count Amazon.com out. I would not count Donald Trump out. I wouldn't count Benjamin Netanyahu out. And, I would not, resort to, acts of celebration that China is, losing its war. This would be stupid. Uh, and I can say that on this kid-friendly program because kids have said worse things about me than insults to my intelligence. Now, now this is what I would suggest. And I like to make these reports when I'm in a good mood because I don't like to be in a bad mood. But here's the thing. This is fundamentally a business competition in areas of technology, artificial intelligence, etc. I am not questioning, apart from, personal and personnel issues, any inferiority of Chinese technology, certainly low price producer, and that's why American factories were over there. But to suggest that I consider Chinese technology to be inferior to American technology or British or Indian technology or Pakistani, that would be wrong. There are strength areas. India makes good clothing, for the American market, whether Bangladesh or India. Used to be made in India sometimes, now more made in Bangladesh. But I haven't even been shopping for my own clothes lately, so who am I to say? And I'm not even trying to be funny. Isn't that strange? What I'm trying to say here is that we do see it as a business competition. The idea of this duality of, is there one China or is there two China, and what are the boundaries? Certainly, what we call the Orient would fall within the scope of the Chinese boundaries. There is a peace effort, a peace treaty. We see South Korea and North Korea described as one, even though we were taught that the United States has influence in South Korea and China has influence in North Korea. This is how we were taught. When I went to school, in the United States. This history is being rewritten. That was a truce. That war never ended. And, that was always part of and consistent with the American one China policy. That South Korea was never loyal to the United States as compared to North Korea, just as India really just surrogates due to colonialism in relation to England or other countries, as Russia now uh, exerting more influence, even in India, and reasserting its alliance. There's another alliance, ASEAN, ASEAN. They claim to do war crimes, excuse me, investigations. However, if you go to ASEAN.org, you see many influences of China in that organization, ASEAN, ASEAN.org. Please help us contain China, but it looks like a Chinese government website to me, ASEAN.org. Also, basically an extension of the Chinese government. What I could tell you in regards to the one China policy, which was always the American policy, our kids, for domestic tranquility reasons, to prevent this war from becoming aggressive on American soil against Chinese nationals of any one of those countries of the Orient, um, that that was the reason our kids were taught these falsehoods that there are two Chinas or two Koreas, etc., or etc. So, what I would suggest here on Earth-Based Records News is that we do confirm our one China policy as like Orient policy, that territory, first and foremost, is consistent with our ongoing one China policy. That we understand this division, South Korea, North Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, that this is part of our misinformation campaign towards American citizens to keep them from spilling, to encourage cultural exchange. Yet, American citizens and other nationals, British nationals, Australian nationals, or Europeans, Scandinavians, etc., that these are not to be held hostage, even in their personal relations. As part of those should be described as cultural exchange, not just with regards to China, but here at the Mexican border, with regards to Hispanics versus Europeans, etc. So we should continue to encourage a voluntary cultural exchange, but never to claim some kind of ownership through personal marital licenses, business relations, that you can claim this as part of the Orient because you engaged in one of these business or personal type relations with an Indian American or a Scandinavian American, a British American, or a Mexican, Hispanic, so we can retrench to these ethnic boundaries with regards to what British common law calls chattel, which is personal property, including women and children. That is to reduce the tensions and continue, voluntary cultural exchange, outside of marriage at this time here in the American homeland. That is what I would advise, unlimited duration, but without the legal impediments to separation during these cultural exchange related personal relations, that the bondages of marriage can create the extended suffering in these cultural exchange type uh, through legal documents. Bondages of marriage through legal or church documents can extend the suffering of when these relationships break up, if they do, and no assumption that they would. So I encourage, continuity in cultural exchange, especially for someone like myself who just, came here and still single, but without the legal impediments to separation through bondages of marriage, either through the court system of our government or through the church systems. That these cultural exchange relationships could be permanent if agreed by both sides, however, not forced through paperwork. Samir Gurati reporting, Buck Show. Walter, in honor of the great Walter Cronkite and Earth Based Records. Thank you.